My name is Gavani Mbogwa. I'm a senior clinical psychologist. I'm the clinical psychologist in charge at AR Hospital. I see inpatients, outpatients, as well as staff. And I'm also a wellness therapist. Men's mental health is largely and critically overlooked, even though data shows us that we really need to pay attention. But before we get into the statistics, first of all, societal norms, cultural norms, and gender norms all come to emphasize on the fact that a man should not show their emotions or should not express themselves. And because of those things, then it reduces help-seeking behavior. And the highest form of stigma is within the family. We say casually, stigma is in the society. But who is that society? It's you and I. So the family, the friends, that's where stigma begins. It's at its highest. It's also an issue because there is no enough awareness. I think when you look at major towns, social media, then we can say there is enough mental health awareness being created. But when you go to the ground, when you go to other towns, like outside Nairobi, when you look at the data of people who have access to social media or a digital tool, there is still a large number of people who are not able to access that. So I would still want to say we still don't have enough awareness in regards to how critical men's mental health is. I would say that both men and women suffer. However, there are some diagnoses that are more likely to be experienced by men. Schizophrenia, for example, when you look at the prevalence of schizophrenia, it's more in men than it is in women, as opposed to maybe mood disorders that is more prevalent in women than men. Diagnoses like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, that is ADHD, is also more prevalent in men than it is in women. When we look at a lot of cases in substance use, I know the data has changed. Today we are seeing more women being treated for alcohol and substance use. But if you go to the ground, go and check the number of admissions, go to rehabs and check the number of people, population, and look at it data, then you'll find that in substance use disorder, so we have more men than women, who are experiencing those mental illnesses. Let me address that by looking at the clinical red flags, which is an interruption in sleep patterns. If an individual is not sleeping well, the communication is that they are overwhelmed. Your brain is overwhelmed for one reason or another. And if your brain is overwhelmed, then you're not able to sleep well, then it's not able to rest, and that also interferes with your functioning. 2, an interruptions in eating patterns. 3, a change in your mood, in terms of either irritability, you're teary, you're withdrawn, you're isolated. 4th one is usually bowel movements, and the 5th one is libido. So when you're really, really stressed and overwhelmed, the libido goes down. Although there's a small category of people who the libido will go up first, then it goes down, okay? But men generally present their symptoms in terms of being aggressive, irritability, anger. That's how they usually come out. Sometimes also you can hear some obsession in their thought processes. So when somebody is ruminating about an issue, you're either complaining repeatedly about your work, how you're stagnating, the issues that you're having, finances, or your wife or your children, you can tell this person is in a spiral. Another one that to be on the lookout for is suicidal ideations. So in very subtle ways, when somebody begins to say, you know, I'm tired, I've done everything, and you know, nothing is working, I'm tired, I wish I could sleep and not wake up. Very, very subtle ways. So some other signs show in reckless, for men specifically, come out in reckless behavior. So I like to say that For example, if somebody is drinking very heavily and you get into a car and you're driving from Langata to Tigoni and you're drunk to a pulp, that's like reckless behavior. Or you're trying to drag race, or you're on a bike and you have no gear. Just reckless behavior could be signs and symptoms that somebody is really, really struggling. That's behaviorally. Clinically, excessive worry, being anxious, having an extremely low mood, withdrawn. We can also see change in terms of performance. So whereas somebody used to be very enthusiastic in the things that they would do, whether it's work or at home, that has completely gone down as well. One, clinically we say when a diagnosis is done earlier, the earlier the diagnosis, the better the prognosis. So that means if we are able to discover what's ailing you early enough, then it means your chances of recovery, your chances of living a full life, your chances of being a better version of themselves are magnified. They are much more higher. And the problem with society is that people wait for worst case scenario to begin to seek help. Okay, so treatment, therapy is critical both on a prevention basis so that you actually don't cross that line where you now have a full-blown diagnosis, but also secondly, if you already have a diagnosis, to learn the best way to be able to manage it and also to be able to identify the triggers and learn how to cope with those triggers. Isolation, for example, because isolation will come from friends, name calling, where somebody sees you as weak. Stigma, there's also a lot of fear to do with judgment as well that comes into play. So it makes it, as in that actually deters or makes it harder for men to be able to seek help. The game changer of mental health is physical activity. Physical activity is the only natural way to ensure your brain is performing. Physical activity is the only natural way to ensure that your brain is performing optimally. Okay, so if you're thinking of an anti-anxiety, physical activity, an antidepressant, physical activity. If you're not sleeping, physical activity. Okay, if you're angry and you're looking for a way to dispense that, physical activity. If you're anxious, physical activity. If you're having issues with how you feel about yourself, you go to the gym, you go do a physical activity, and you'll just see how different it is. So, learning stress management techniques. Yeah, because when you look at the mental health definition, stress is part and parcel of life. So you're gonna meet stressors every day. You need to learn how do you deal with your stressors. We keep absorbing from the digital tools. You're either scrolling through your phone, sitting on a computer, you know, making phone calls. There is too much that is going on. So just trying to de-stress in quiet time, do a social media detox. I always challenge people, do a 24-hour, including WhatsApp. Therapy is also a good coping strategy. But just looking for a space that is for men, by men, is actually a very, very powerful thing, because you're able to relate in oneness. The other way is just to go online and look for resources, read books, listen to podcasts. There are so many podcasts that somebody can listen to that would help empower them. And last but not least, just do a self-inventory. Self-inventory, and real self-inventory that looks at your strengths, that looks at your weaknesses, that is able to look at what are those traits that you have that are toxic, that you need to work on, but also going ahead to work on them. Last but not least, building your self-awareness. And I like to say self-awareness is 30% knowledge, 70% action. So you might know all you want, that I need help, I need to be a better version of myself. But if you don't take the steps to figure out in all areas of my life, physically, what do I need to do? Emotionally, what do I need to do? Spiritually, what do I need to do? Cognitively, in terms of your thoughts, what do I need to do? Professionally, what do I need to do? Because you have to keep growing, yeah? And if you keep growing, then it helps you feel better about yourself.